Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. It is 6:21 a.m. East Coast time. It is Monday, November 11th. I hope you all are having a great start to your day. We have an NBA 6-game slate tonight over on Draftkings, Fantasy Draft, wherever you like to play. We're going to break it down for you. But before we do, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Sal Vetri, and I do cover daily fantasy sports in the NFL, NBA, WNBA, and the MLB streets. We already have an NFL Showdown video out for tonight. You should be able to check that one out either on my YouTube channel or if you're listening on the audio version. There is an audio version. You should check that out as well. Hit a 5-star rate and review. Helps me out a ton. You can check the NFL version out there, and then NBA videos like this one and audio versions, podcasts, every single day on the channel. Linked up down below in the description is my exclusive content over on Patreon. If you're confused by what Patreon is, a couple people reach out to me. I hear you saying it. What is that? If you click the link down below, it'll tell you everything. There's a video of me describing what Patreon is over there. There's descriptions of every single thing that you need to know. And if you still have any questions, just feel free to reach out anywhere. YouTube comments, Twitter, Patreon itself, anything is okay. Also, my social medias are down there. Twitter at SalVetriDFS. Facebook, Sal Vetri Facebook page, and Instagram. I'm going to be making a lot more Instagram content. Already have the past couple of days at Sal Vetri over there as well. So, appreciate you being here. I will quickly want to plug Fantasy Draft because they are revolutionizing the way that you do play daily fantasy sports, eliminating rake. I kid you not. I woke up to somebody this morning in my DMs that said that they were playing, and I'm not going to give away anybody's, or actually it was on the Discord that we have for our priority patrons and Hall of Fame tiers. Just said, hey man, I cashed in all 6 of my fantasy draft entries, so it helped me with the huge DraftKings loss that I had. That's exactly what's going to happen. You can play the exact same lineup, and obviously you can't play the exact same lineup over on Fantasy Draft because they have an extra flex positionality, and you can do a couple of different things, and the salaries are always different. But if you are going to have a hard day on DraftKings, it's going to be automatically better on Fantasy Draft because instead of getting taken 10 to 15%, we can call it interest, rake, right, from the site, skimming it off the top, you're getting 0 to 3%, for 0 really to like 1.5%. From Fantasy Draft. So that's what's going to happen even if you have a really rough day on DraftKings. You can have an okay day on Fantasy Draft and turn a profit and actually turn a bad weekend into a good weekend because of the rake. So I'm not just saying this because it's nothing. Again, you can make a simple plus and minus formula into Excel and you can just track DraftKings. In Fantasy Draft, you will see if you start with, say, just a $50 or $100 bankroll, it's going to last way longer in Fantasy Draft no matter what and probably grow actually than compared to DraftKings. So there's a link down below in the description of this video to Fantasy Draft. You should check them out. They have contests for NBA right now, like we see. I'll be playing in some of those tonight. And they have contests for the NFL as well, some bigger ones. If you leave a 5-star rate and then you review and leave your Fantasy Draft handle in the review, you'll be entered into a chance to win a one of 3 entries for next week's Fantasy Draft main event on Sunday. So those are all the plugs. Please hit the subscribe button. I really appreciate it. We're going to crush through 15,000 subscribers. We already did. And on to 20,000 is the new journey and goal before the next month to 20,000 before Christmas would be absolutely incredible. So thank you all so much. Let's get into the video now. We'll start with the injury news. We'll go team by team on these 12 teams, 6 games, starting with Boston. Enes Kanter is questionable with a knee injury. If he is in, well, it's going to help him a ton. He's a good value at 4,900 in my opinion against Dallas and undersized and really not the greatest of defenders in Dwight Powell and Maxi Kleber. Kristaps Porzingis should be back from rest, but definitely a tough matchup. But directly matchup for Enes Kanter seems good. Robert Williams we saw dominate in the last game. He played 22 minutes. I mean, I don't know if you saw the last game of highlights of Robert Williams. Go back and look at them. This man was catching alley-oops from 3 feet behind the rim with one hand, bringing him back and dunking him. It was insane. He did it a couple of times each side of the rim. Daniel Tice will also see a bump. I really don't know if I have a ton of interest in either Tice or Williams because they're both kind of priced up at this point. But if Kanter is in, he's not priced up enough. I'll have interest in him. This is probably some of the saddest news we've seen in the NBA so far this season. Gordon Hayward is going to be out and miss a lot of time with a hand injury, I believe a fractured hand. Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, Jalen Brown, all those guys are going to see a bump, probably Jalen Brown the most. But Gordon Hayward was playing absolutely phenomenal. He was playing better than Kemba. He was playing better than Tatum, who's been playing really well, both of those guys. Gordon Hayward was just one of the better players in the NBA through the first couple weeks, and it was good to see him finally back and healthy, and then this happens to him. So very sad, but there's going to be impact to the rest of those guys. Tim Frazier is probable today with a shoulder injury. He's been missing a lot of the games lately. He's minimum price. Bruce Brown Jr. and Langston Galloway will see an impact here. And Derrick Rose, if he actually does suit up, who is questionable today with a hamstring injury. If Derrick Rose plays at 5,800, not a ton of interest. Tim Frazier back. Bruce Brown Jr. back, going to be probable. Langston Galloway. But the big news here, Blake Griffin is probable with his hamstring injury that has kept him out until this part. It's going to directly impact Markieff Morris, who will head back to the bench. Christian Wood will head back to maybe not even playing in the rotation. And now Andre Drummond's 1.5 fantasy points per minute this season are probably going to jump back down or drop back down to the 1.3 range. Blake Griffin is only $7,200 on DraftKings, $14,000 flat on fantasy drafts. If you're getting normal Blake Griffin minutes here and there's no cap, and I'm sure we'll get news before lock, and he's going to play 33, 34 Blake Griffin minutes at $7,200, yeah, that's a 40-plus point day in the making more times than not. Now, if you get a news that he's going to be capped at 25 minutes, well, then it's an issue at 7,200. You probably go elsewhere. But keep an eye on the minutes restriction for Griffin because he's one of the most underpriced players on the slate for his skill set, and we don't know with these injuries is he the same guy. But I'm going to assume he's better than a $7,200 player. This Blake Griffin was a constant, at the worst, $8,000 flat player last season. Getting into Golden State, Draymond Green is probable with a finger injury, and the triple-double, walking triple-double himself for Golden State, just based on everything he's going to have to do for this team, is going to be back. It's going to hurt Eric Paschall, who is potentially still going to start. We've seen Draymond get the starts at the 5. Now, with Willie Cauley-Stein back and healthier, I imagine they start Willie Cauley-Stein at the 5, Draymond at the 4, especially in a matchup with Rudy Gobert, but there is a chance Draymond Green starts at the 5, which will keep Eric Paschall in the starting lineup. Amari Spellman for Golden State is going to be questionable with an ankle injury. That's just going to help all these rotational bigs and Marquise Chris get more minutes if he misses. Eric Paschall, Draymond Green to an extent. Glenn Robinson, the third's 4 minutes might go up instead of him playing at the 2 and the 3. Heading to Houston now against New Orleans here. Nice pace-up spot. Daniel House Jr. is questionable with an ankle injury. He rolled his ankle in Saturday's game, so there's a really good chance he misses here. Price point doesn't change on him since his last time out, $5,300. Eric Gordon, Ben McLemore, PJ Tucker, they're the main people to see minutes bumps and just overall usage bumps. Austin Rivers also, I would imagine, picks up a couple of minutes in the rotation as they play a very tight rotation in Houston. Paul George has been practicing, but he's been ruled out again for Monday. He's getting very close. I would imagine he is, if at the very most, a week away, even potentially returning this week. He's only $8,200 if he was supposed to play today. Unreal price point on him. He's out with his shoulder injury again. Kawhi, Landry Shamet, Montrezl Harrell, and Lou Williams all still going to see the bumps because of Paul George being out. For Memphis, Grayson Allen will be out with an ankle injury, going to continue to help Tyus Jones as the backup point guard, and mainly the backup shooting guard, who's getting a lot more run lately, Marko Guduric. Brandon Clark is questionable with a back injury. It's going to help Jay Crowder, Jaren Jackson Jr., all the bigs pretty much for Memphis against San Antonio. Not the greatest of spots, though. We'll see if he suits up today. He missed the last game over the weekend. Jeff Teague has been missing a couple games now. The latest was yesterday's game. They played a 3:30 afternoon game on Football Sunday, but nobody really knew about it. He had a really good game from Karl-Anthony Towns, another solid game from Andrew Wiggins. He's questionable with an illness. If he's out, well, it's going to help Jarrett Culver, who continues to start. And this is a big if, another asterisk on this, if Shabazz Napier is out, who is also questionable, leaning doubtful, Andrew Wiggins sees another big bump up with his assist rate going to being a team high. Karl-Anthony Towns' assist rate takes a bump up, and Trevion Graham has been seeing more minutes with both Teague and Napier out. Napier, the other part of this, if he's questionable with a hamstring injury, did not play yesterday. He's been doubtful, though, so questionable, really leaning doubtful. It will help Jeff Teague pick up more minutes, closer to 30 if he plays and is healthy. If not, Jarrett Culver will have his 30 minutes as normal. Andrew Wiggins will continue to be a ball controller in this offense. Cat and Trevion Graham also benefit. Lonzo Ball has already been ruled out once again with an adductor injury. Drew Holiday took over as the point guard. Saw his assist rate just go through the roof. He had 11 assists in the last game. It allowed Kendrick Williams to get into the starting rotation. They just changed their whole rotation up. Instead of Holiday at the 2 and Lonzo at the 1, and then Brandon Ingram getting to start at the 4. They shifted everybody over. They went Drew Holiday at the 1. They ended up going with J.J. Redick at the 2, and then they just went to Brandon Ingram at the 3 instead of the 4, which opened up a 4 spot, and they ended up going with Kendrick Williams and then started Derek Favors at the 5. So it's an interesting spot. If they do that again, yeah, Kendrick Williams would be in play. J.J. Redick can be somewhat in play. Josh Hart would see more minutes in the rotation, as well as Frank Jackson. But the biggest hurt from this is probably two people. Frank Jackson, one, because he's not going to get direct backup point guard minutes as many as he should if he was in the starting lineup. Or now he's only going to get direct backup point guard minutes instead of being in the starting lineup if he played at the 1, just direct fill-in for Lonzo, and they kept the same rotation with Drew Holiday at the 2. And then also, Brandon Ingram should see a little bit of a hit. If he's not going to be starting at the 4 and the 3, yes, he's still going to pick up boards and rebounds, but not as many easy boards and block opportunities and just easier and 1 opportunities as you're playing at the 4 closer to the rim. You need to rely a little bit more on your shooting. So at his price point, it's okay, but just keep an eye on that. The biggest beneficiaries here are obviously Kendrick Williams entering the starting lineup, potentially J.J. Redick again entering the starting lineup, and without a doubt, Drew Holiday playing point guard. Just a reminder that Serge Ibaka will continue to miss time, and Kyle Lowry is going to continue to miss time. We saw last night, Fred. I said it on yesterday's podcast. If you didn't tune in because you were watching the NFL, you had a $6,900 Fred VanVleet. He's still the exact same price, pretty much playing the Kyle Lowry role. Like, the difference between these players is not that much when you talk about fantasy production. Oh, he's comparing Fred VanVleet? No. When you talk about fantasy production. And also, he's like the Swiss Army knife, the Draymond Green of point guards, Fred VanVleet, in terms of just picking up every single stat and working his ass off the entire game. The guy's averaging 38 minutes per game. He's going to continue to shoot fine. He picks up boards. He doesn't get as many rebounds, or he doesn't get as many assists as Kyle Lowry, but he'll pick up assists, some steals. And what happened last night, he drops 49.5 fantasy points at $6,900, and he's the same exact price point tonight. Tougher matchup against the Clippers for sure, but he's going to see a big bump up. Pascal Siakam's usage goes up, and then Norman Powell, who entered the starting lineup and had a good game, he's going to see a overall minutes bump and everything in this rotation. You could also throw OG Anunoby into the players who will be impacted. Let's get on to the target offense sheet here. We don't have the game total of Minnesota and Detroit, but we have every other game total so far, so we can work with that. I will blow this up for the people that are watching at home. There you go. So this is the target offense sheet. It's available over on Patreon. My projections for the NBA, I project every single player's points, will also be available over on Patreon as well. As well as an easier, crisper model. It's my entire projections model, and then I shift it all over to an interest where I put yes, maybe, or no, and my player pool pretty much for that night in sort of a ranking in a priority order of yes, maybe, or no for how I get to them. That is all linked up down below over on Patreon. If you want to join the community, again, you can click the link and check it out. Please hit that subscribe button as well as we continue to get through this video. If you're listening on the audio version, hit that 5 stars rate and review. A couple of seconds just to hit the 3 dots. Thank you so much. There's our mid-roll solicitation for you, so thank you. Detroit and Minnesota, again, we don't have the total here yet, but look, Detroit's going to be really hard to pin down now. Derrick Rose potentially returns, so, I mean, a $3,000 Tim Frazier isn't even that appealing, even if Derrick Rose doesn't return, because it seems like they've been really liking what Bruce Brown has been doing at the point guard position. It's a good matchup against Minnesota in terms of the point guard, and down low against Minnesota has been a tougher matchup. Minnesota's down low defense in terms of Karl-Anthony Towns, huge step forwards compared to last year. And Robert Covington, you saw it last season when they acquired him for that final 2 months of the season, month and a half. It was the best defense that they have played in years, in 2 or 3 years. So far this season, they've improved since last season. People trying to tell me that being 18th ranked overall in defense and improving to top 5 in turnover percentage, improving to top 12 in offensive and defensive rebounding, and being 18th ranked overall is not an improvement compared to where they've been ranked in the past couple of years, on average 24th over the last 2 seasons. So definitely a increase in terms of matchups for Detroit. It's a tougher matchup down low for guys like Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond, but they're sort of matchup proof. The issue here is that Andre Drummond is still expensive with Blake Griffin back, so if he's going to play his normal minutes, it's really hard to get to Andre Drummond tonight, and then it's hard to really get to Blake Griffin unless we know about his minutes. My priority from this team is Blake Griffin at $7,200. Like, if he's going to play 30 to 33 minutes in this game, $7,200 is a smash spot for him if indeed he is fully healthy, and I imagine he is if he's returning. So Blake Griffin's the priority there. Luke Kennard's still at a fine price point, but there should be overall shots and usage bumped down with Blake Griffin entering the starting lineup and playing most of his minutes alongside him. If you do get a situation where Derrick Rose is out and Tim Frazier starts at point guard, I mean, it is a $3,000 point guard, so you have to at least look at it and consider it. He should play somewhere in the 20s of minutes, but for right now, it's really just Blake Griffin standing out from this team. Derrick Rose at $5,800 if he started wouldn't all that much. Minnesota side of it, if Jeff Teague plays, I like his price tag. Somewhat difficult matchup on the opposite side here, but I do like his price tag. And also, you already have Tim Frazier returning. If you get Derrick Rose back, it's just an automatic bump up for Jeff Teague and Jarrett Culver and whoever starts at point guard, because those guys are much worse defenders than a Bruce Brown Jr. or a Langston Galloway, who have been out there for the primary or the majority of pretty much the season, the last 4 or 5 games or so. Minnesota, the standouts are clearly Karl-Anthony Towns, a more difficult matchup, especially with Blake Griffin returning at the 4. A more difficult matchup for Towns here, but the price tag at $10,000 flat is hard to ignore. He dropped 60 points last night. We can see if there's any sort of minutes restriction on a back-to-back, but they have not indicated that this season. If Jeff Teague misses once again, then Jarrett Culver sure is an okay play, but it gives me much more interest in Andrew Wiggins, who price point is getting up there at $7,700. But, I mean, look at this guy. He's got box score. He drops 40 a couple nights back, 40 real-life points, 60 fantasy points in that game. Continuously hitting 40 fantasy points. His assist rate is the reason why. He's controlling the ball more. He's acting as the point guard on a lot more possessions than he ever does when Jeff Teague and or Shabazz Napier are in. When you're down your top 2 point guards, just other people are going to naturally have to pick up the slack, and he has a team-leading assist rate over the past few games without these guys in there. Boston and Dallas, a 111 team total for Boston, a 107 team total for Dallas, a 218 overall. 4-point favorites is Boston here. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of a productivity loss when there's no Gordon Hayward. Now, these guys are priced like it, though, outside of maybe Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum's been close to the $7,700 price range. Now he's $7,500, and he finds himself in an okay matchup at best, though. If he's going to be starting at the 4 instead of starting at the 3, it becomes very difficult to really like Jason Tatum here. The price tag is what I like, but a lot of matchups in spots where they set a defense against him, it's going to be Kristaps Porzingis on him. And sure, they're going to play a lot of transition. This is a game that seems to have a decent pace here of 108.92, the best, second best on the slate behind the Clippers in Toronto at the late night game at 10:30. So Jason Tatum's price tag is nice, but the matchup could be difficult against Porzingis. Jalen Brown's price tag I think is completely fine, probably enters the starting rotation. Those are the two main pieces, and if Enes Kanter starts, I do like that. You can get to some Marcus Smart at 5,400 if you want. I think I prioritize this team as Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum, Enes Kanter, and that is where I would go, but a lot of pieces here look nice. Dallas side of it, Luka. If you want to get to Luka, you can get to Luka. I mean, the guy's going to just score 50 fantasy points more times than not, and if he hits his triple-double, it'll be 60, and if he hits a massive 30-point shooting day with the triple-double, it's going to be 70. Like, Luka is a machine out there. It is without a doubt a difficult matchup for Luka against the Kembas and the Marcus Smarts. Really just the Marcus Smarts who should be out there a good amount of the time on him. They only have a 107 team total. You have a favorable matchup coming back, the second best on the slate in terms of fantasy points per game allowed to the power forward position. And now there's no Gordon Hayward. So even if Enes Kanter comes in, we know he's not a good defender at all. So this is a good spot for Kristaps Porzingis. Once again, this team is just Luka and Porzingis for me. Based on this slate, I'm not going to have as much interest in Luka, which is scary, of course, but I just like some other guards up top. So I think my priorities are Kristaps and then Luka from this team, just in terms of like how much I actually get to them. And again, this can all change, and you should be checking out my Patreon interest pool just to know. I had updates up until lock and even after lock because it's 6:30 and these games will start in 12 and a half hours, and lots of things are subject to change. Some other spots, San Antonio and Memphis. San Antonio actually has a very high team total here, a couple of high team totals, a 117.75 team total. That's nice to see. And you have a $6,300 Lamarcus Aldridge, $6,300. I don't get the price point. It's going to be hard for me to ignore it. I get it. He hasn't been playing as well this year. His shooting percentage has been down. That's something that I expect to rebound. And now he faces Memphis, who might seem scary, right? Jonas Valanciunas, Jaren Jackson Jr., Brandon Clark if he plays, all these tall bodies, but they're one of the worst rebounding teams in the league. And Jaren Jackson Jr. can't stay out of foul trouble. So, if anything, that helps Lamarcus Aldridge in terms of getting to the line more. So, $6,300 Lamarcus Aldridge, it beats me. Why use that price? A tougher matchup for DeJounte Murray, who's been continued. He played 26 minutes 2 games ago, but continues to seem to be on a minutes restriction. Tougher matchup for him. San Antonio's 11-point favorites here. The by far, in a way, interest is Lamarcus Aldridge. $7,000 DeMar DeRozan you can get to if you'd like, but it's Lamarcus Aldridge, and that's really, it's just too cheap of a price tag on him at $6,300. He's been playing. Everything has been fine in terms of his shot selection, where he's been playing on the court. We saw him have one fine shooting day. He got back to his normal above average percentages than he has been seeing this season, and he went off for 57 points. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but Lamarcus Aldridge more times than not in this matchup will score you 35 points at a minimum, and he's $6,300. So if he scores you 30, you're feeling good about it. So 35 points with the 50-plus point ceiling, and realistically 40 points more times than not, more times than the other players in his range of 6K. Hard to ignore that for a center in a good rebounding spot. On the Memphis side, nothing really stands out. Ja Morant should be back from rest purposes. Same thing for Jonas Valanciunas. He should be fully rested here. Just nothing stands out. The value I don't think is all that great in terms of Ja Morant's price tag one, but also like the Dylan Brooks. If you get no Brandon Clark, I think it makes Jaren Jackson Jr. a little bit better, and also Jay Crowder. But nothing really stands out from the Memphis side on a 6-game slate. Wow, here's the mother load of all spots. You better be getting players from this game. New Orleans and Houston, a 243, the highest I've seen this season, a 243 game total, a 119.25 team total for New Orleans, second highest on the slate, only to their opponent, a 123.75 team total for Houston. Yes, I have all the interest in the world in James Harden. Yes, I have all the interest in the world in Russell Westbrook. This is yes, I have interest in PJ Tucker and Eric Gordon, especially if Daniel House is out. Eric Gordon even more potentially enters the starting rotation. You can get to Clint Capella in the best matchup on the slate for a center, and now he's in the best game environment. So every single thing on Houston for me stands out today. You have a $8,800 Russell Westbrook, that cheap of a price tag. I get it. He's only been scoring 35 and 40 fantasy points over the last couple of days, and then he rested, and he only had 25 points before that. But now you're putting Russell Westbrook in one of the fastest game environments on the slate. He's a 4.5-point favorite with this big of a team total. Yeah, I think he's going to contribute to that more so than some of the other $8,800 players and 8K players in the slate. I prioritize this as Russell Westbrook 1A James Harden 1B, and then I probably get to PJ Tucker at 2, 3 Clint Capella, 4 Eric Gordon. Keep an eye on Daniel House's status. This is the best spot on the slate for any of these teams. This Houston against New Orleans, and on the opposite side, New Orleans against Houston, but it's the best spot. It's as good as it gets. On the New Orleans side of it, Drew Holiday is way too cheap, going to be starting at point guard, but no Lonzo Ball. Sign me up for that. Brandon Ingram moves to the 3, but he's only 7,800. He's been slowly averaging over 40 fantasy points per game over the last couple of weeks, if not higher than that. So lots of good spots. The one thing I'll point out is J.J. Redick went off last game, but don't really trust that going back to it. He's a shooter, right? And he shot 5 of 9 from 3. So if he does that again, well then sure, yeah, J.J. Redick is going to be needed in your rosters, but he can also go out there and shoot 3 of 10, and it's nowhere near needed, right? So it's a spot where from the New Orleans side of the ball, if Kendrick Williams is back in the starting rotation, it's a tough matchup without a doubt against PJ Tucker and or Clint Capella. But just the amount of possessions that'll be in this game and the amount of points scored, it's very hard to ignore that at his price tag, especially if he starts at the 4 again. So my interests from New Orleans are, number 1, it's going to be Drew Holiday without a doubt. He is just way too cheap for this matchup. He's in line to score 40-plus fantasy points in this game, and he's priced below that. So Drew Holiday is number 1, Kendrick Williams number 2, and then Brandon Ingram number 3. And then on the opposite side, like I said, it's 1A Russell Westbrook because of the price tag, 1B James Harden, then PJ Tucker, then Clint Capella and Eric Gordon for me. The entire game, my favorite play would probably be Russell Westbrook, then Harden, then Drew Holiday. So it's just a really good spot. You don't have to stack. So for the people that say, I want to be stacking these games, look, if you're getting 3 players from this game, don't call it a stack. You're just naturally getting more players from that game because it's a better game. There's no correlation reasons to want to stack. The only reason for NBA and stacking is to hope and wish for the game going to overtime. So 6% of NBA games go to overtime, so you better hope, and that's really what you're doing there. It goes to overtime. You have 4 or 5 or 6 players from it if that's really your goal, and then you can just get way more fantasy points in the field at that point. But there's no correlation in stacking in these games. The idea that one player is going to score more because on the other side they're scoring more, it makes sense if they're pushing the tempo. And the only correlation really is if Drew Holiday is going off and the game is close, or if the game is close and Drew Holiday is going off, you could be damn sure that Harden and or Westbrook are going off. I understand that logic, but it's not correlating with each other. You're kind of looking back at it in retrospect. So just get players from this game. It's a fantastic game environment. Golden State and Utah. Like I said, Draymond Green is going to be back here, but it's just a brutal spot. I do have interest in his price tag of $6,600 just because of everything he's going to have to do. And D'Angelo Russell is back, so, I mean, not the greatest of shooters in terms of percentages and efficiency, but that should help Draymond Green's assist numbers, at least compared to having just nobody out there. And Alec Burks started the last game at the 2 over Jordan Poole, as he should. He's a much better offensive player, and he's a much better fantasy player for us, so that also helps Draymond Green's upside. Golden State, my favorite play is indeed Alec Burks if he continues to start again. He's just playing big minutes, 30-plus minutes for a guy who's averaging over a fantasy point per minute this season at a shooting guard position where he'll also ball dominate the ball or handle the ball. He's a backup point guard at this point for Russell, but he's playing alongside of him and then playing some minutes without him as the point guard. So just the way that the matchups break out here, I prefer Alec Burks the most, then Draymond Green, and then Russell at his price tag. But I'm not going to get to too much Russell today. I mean, just because you have Russell Westbrook, I'm going to get to a lot more Russell Westbrook than D'Angelo Russell because he's only $500 more, and there's just so many other pricing spots. So he should take a lot more shots now, but it's just a tough matchup with Draymond Green back and Alec Burks playing really well. Hard to prioritize him on his own team. Utah side of the ball, look, if Draymond starts at the 5, it's a tougher matchup for Rudy Gobert without a doubt. If he starts at the 4, it's a much easier matchup. So keep an eye on that. I would get to Rudy Gobert the most from this team. I would probably get to Donovan Mitchell the most at his price tag, a 111.75 team total for Utah. Only a 101.75, lowest on the slate by far, by 5 overall points for Golden State. So Utah, I prioritize as Donovan Mitchell, then Gobert. Gobert maybe jumps over if Draymond Green starts with the 4. Nothing else stands out all that much. I know that Conley will be in a fine spot here. Doesn't really stand out too much for me. Bogdanovich, he's actually a player that stands out, and he'd probably be the third interest from this team at his price point. Continues to play extremely well. Lastly, before we get to my early interests, Clippers and Toronto. Clippers have a nice total of 116.75. Toronto only a 106.25. Look, I like Fred VanVleet. I get it. He's $6,500. He's in a tougher matchup, or $6,900. He's in a tougher matchup tonight. But once again, like last night, his 49 fantasy points, probably a little bit of a higher game for him. But the 40-plus range is in the pocket, in the back pocket for this guy if he's going to play 38 minutes at the point guard position. So he's just not priced up enough. Price point didn't change because these salaries came out pretty much the same time as his game was going on. It was like the first quarter was starting when the game was starting when he started to produce. So, yes, Fred VanVleet and then Pascal Siakam are my priorities here. Marc Gasol didn't do all that much. We saw Chris Bouchard play more minutes. These centers would be in a good spot, but it's hard to pin down where they're going to be getting their minutes from. So Norman Powell is still cheap. OG Anunoby is still cheap. All these guys are cheap enough because their production and their minutes based on no Serge Ibaka and Kyle Lowry started, and we didn't get to see that, and neither did DraftKings before they priced them today. So my interest from this team are Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam on sort of a tier of their own in that order. And then you have really good plays in Norman Powell because of the minutes he's playing, and OG Anunoby because of the minutes and shot attempts he's putting up and shooting rather well this year. Getting 40 fantasy points at a clip at his price tag is very good. So those 4 players are all in play for me. No Paul George still. From the Clippers side of it, I don't know. Not much stands out here. I mean, no Serge Ibaka surely helps, like the Zubaks of the world, and it helps the Montrezl Harrells for some of their minutes, but they don't stand out on this big of a slate. Harrell's price point is cheap enough to get to him and feel fine as always, but not something I want to get to. Prioritizing Kawhi on this slate doesn't seem like something I'm going to end up doing. Again, he is just dominant. Maybe I should look at it a little bit more. His assist percentage is unreal right now. He is one of the highest usage rates in the league, above 40%. Obviously, he's going to most of this is going to change once Paul George comes back, but he's playing much more pick and roll, much more ISOs. He's just the entire team on his possession. So his crazy 1.89 fantasy points per minute is kind of stable when you're kind of setting up plays to just have him hold the ball and run with it. So I'm going to look more into Kawhi. He'd be the main thing and really the only thing I'd want from the Clippers on this slate. I don't think there's too much value where the Clippers are. My early interest, I will blow this out a little bit for the people that are watching on the YouTube version. Early interest here, we'll go through them. I kind of hit on most of them as we were going through the game by game, but at this top in terms of salary, we'll go by it. James Harden, $11,500 on DraftKings, $20,300 on FantasyDraft. He's an early interest in that spot. Shooting guard eligible against New Orleans. It's just as good as it gets. A 42% usage rate, averaging 35 minutes per game. Hard not to like it. Karl Anthony Towns at $10,000 flat. Again, he's $1,500 cheaper than Harden, so there is actually a decision here because you do save money. 29% usage rate gets Detroit, who does have Andre Drummond and potentially Blake Griffin back today. 33 minutes per game. It's a good spot for him. On a back-to-back, we'll see if there's anything comes out about Karl Anthony Towns' minutes. I imagine he'll play. Russell Westbrook is one of my favorite plays in the slate. He's only $8,800 in this really good game environment. Point guard only eligibility, but a 32 usage rate, a 32.5 minutes per game. It's as good as it gets for him. Brandon Ingram at $7,800. Concerns from him moving to the 4 to the 5 if they roll with the lineup they had last time. He did get there at $8,000 last time out. He scored 41.5 fantasy points. Now he's $7,800. Price point drops, but he's also playing at the 4, or he's also playing at the 3 instead of the 4, which is overall less fantasy points per game, and it relies more on your shooting than your peripherals, which is a concern. But in this matchup, I don't think it's as much of a concern. He has a 29.6 usage rate, 32 minutes per game is really good. Jason Tatum is the first guy that I'll like and take advantage of. No Gordon Hayward being in the lineup. He's priced at a fair price point. Could have a difficult matchup for parts of this game against Porzingis, which is the concern. But it's nice if he starts at the 4, although the bad matchup, you can throw him into your small forward spot so you get more players that are closer to the rim in your lineup. Naturally, lineup construction-wise, he's a power forward, but he counts as a small forward, so you should put him in that spot so you can get more centers and power forwards into your lineup. Jrue Holiday at $7,400. It's too cheap. It is way too cheap of a price tag for a guy who you can put in a shooting guard spot as a point guard. That's a very good and sharp move to be doing. Putting your point guard in your shooting guard spot, you should always put point guards for more upside. In your power forward and small spot, in your power forward spot, you should always put centers for more upside, or more times than not, at least, or at least try and prioritize that. Small forward spot, you should prioritize putting centers and power forwards if possible that night, like we just said with Jason Tatum. So Holiday is my favorite play from New Orleans. He's my third favorite play. He's right there. He's so cheap, though, so he's right there with Harden. I'm going to prefer Harden more just because of the ceiling, but he's right there for $4,000 cheaper than Harden as maybe my second best player, second favorite play in that game behind Russell Westbrook. The usage rate of 22% is surely going to come up as he's a point guard. It'll probably rival somewhere around 30%. 35 minutes per game are hard to ignore. Donovan Mitchell is my favorite play from Utah. Again, I would rather have Jrue Holiday, so it's really hard for me to get to Mitchell. I'd rather have Fred VanVleet for $400 cheaper in his matchup and his overall role at the price point. Blake Griffin is in yellow for me because I want to see what the minutes look like. If we get any news on a minutes restriction, then I don't have any interest. He's $7,200 on DraftKings, $14,000 on FantasyDraft. If he's going to play full minutes, 32 plus minutes, 33, 34 minutes like Blake Griffin usually does, it's really hard to ignore $7,200 price tag here. Fred VanVleet, like I said, I continue to like. We finished up on the last target or on the target offense sheet discussing Toronto and the Clippers. You can put him into a shooting guard spot, like I just said, but he'll be the point guard with no Kyle Lowry. Another really good spot. The usage rate of 21% is surely going to come up as a point guard, probably somewhere around the 26%. And this man is nuts. He's averaging 37.4 fantasy points per game, or 37.4 minutes per game, and 35 fantasy points per game. It's just crazy. Draymond Green at $6,600. I prefer getting up to Fred VanVleet at a different position. I much prefer getting to Lamarcus Aldridge at $6,300, and I might even prefer Jalen Brown at $6,300, who is below this as well. It's just really hard to get to Draymond. I like him. If he starts at the 5, I like him more, but a tough matchup against Gobert in this Utah defense. The only upside is he's going to just have to do everything for this team in terms of rebounding, even assists, playing off of him really. So It's an okay spot. Just know that he's not as much of a priority. I'm going to put him in yellow right now. It's just really the price tag that I think is intriguing for the upside. Jalen Brown and Lamarcus Aldridge are both 6,300. It's without a doubt Lamarcus Aldridge more. They're the same price on Fantasy Draft at 12,400. I prefer Aldridge more than Brown, but Brown does have upside. Price tag did shoot up a good amount on both sides. He's usually been like a mid 5K player, but he is going to produce a lot more, potentially even definitely more minutes. He's averaging 30 per game. I imagine that takes up to the 32 to 34 range without Gordon Hayward. 23.3% usage rate. That might drop a little bit if he enters the starting lineup more, so keep an eye on that, but Aldridge at 6,300 is just a slam dunk play in my opinion. Bogdanovich at 6,200, 12,000 on Fantasy Draft against Golden State. Look, he's going to be a small forward here. He counts as a power forward, so don't put him in that spot though, but you can put him in your small forward spot, averaging 32.5 minutes per game and a very impressive 26% usage rate. I mean, this guy's not just a spot-up shooter like a lot of people think he is. 26.1% usage rate. You're doing a lot more with the ball when you're out there, so good spot for him. OG Anunoby's price point's up at 6K flat. I might not get there just because of this slate, 12 games. I think there's other spots we can get value, but he's playing 33 minutes per game. Those minutes have been bigger as of late, closer to 35. No usage is the issue. Like, he has a 13.6% usage rate. Might bump up a little bit with no Kyle Lowry, but he's really relying on really good shooting right now and just his defensive steals and blocks and things like that he can pick up. So it might not be the spot for him. I'll put him in yellow as well, just because he's not a priority on the slate. My favorite play from Golden State is without a doubt Alec Burks. Put him in the shooting guard spot. He'll operate as a point guard when there's no D'Angelo Russell on the court for times, and he's just a really good point per minute producer. 5,200 on DraftKings, 10,100 on Fantasy Draft. PJ Tucker, and this really good game environment, 5,200. He's had some good games, and they dropped down to bad games. Look, he has a 10.6% usage rate. He'll pick up some block and steals on the defensive side. He'll pick up some rebounds. He's not going to ever have a good usage rate because when he has the ball in his hands, he's more times than not just shooting a spot up three or something like that. So he has to get you rebounds. He has to have a decent shooting night. But in this game environment, how many plays you're going to run, overall points, I do like it. 34 minutes per game is hard to ignore. Ennis Cantor is in yellow at 4,900. He's center only, which hurts a little bit, but if he's in play, or if he does play here against Dallas, it's a really good spot. 4,900 on DraftKings, $9,900 on Fantasy Draft. I have interest as of right now. Josh Koji is important to point out that he's just been balling out without any Jeff Teague out there, and Napier. So if both those guys miss again, Koji at 4,700 is actually a good price point to put into your shooting guard spot. Usage has come up for him. He's been playing somewhere around 32 minutes per game over the last 3 or 4 without Teague or Napier. It's a nice spot for the guy who, behind Towns, behind Culver, whose direct impact comes up in minutes, but even Josh Okogie been playing better than Culver. He's been seeing more ball responsibilities as well. $4,700 JJ Redick, I haven't read. I don't want to play him. Look, I know he had a good game last time out. He has an 18.7% usage rate on the year. He's going to probably, if he enters the starting lineup, play closer to 28 to 30 minutes more times than not. The issue with me, and it's a really good matchup here, is just he's shooting dependent. So if he's not owned, then yeah, get to him. But if he's highly owned and you're banking on a chalky player having to hit 4 or really 5+ threes in the spot, with his price point increasing, it's tough, but he should be in the starting lineup again, so keep an eye on him. Maybe he doesn't deserve to be a red, but for right now he is for me. Kendrick Williams from the same team at 4,300. My interests from this team go Drew Holiday, Kendrick Williams, and then Brandon Ingram. If the lineup is the same we saw it as last time, which I imagine it might be, Kendrick Williams at the 4 with Favors at the 5, Ingram at the 3, JJ Redick at the 2, and Drew Holiday at the 1, the point guard position, then yeah, I would like Kendrick Williams a lot at 4,300. Price point did not come up nearly enough for this matchup. He would be a power forward in that spot, which you could put into the small forward spot, which is again once a sharp move for lineup construction. That's pretty much it. Trevion Graham is worth mentioning at 3,800. He's a terrible point per minute producer. 13% usage rate is pretty atrocious, but he's been playing huge minutes, like 35+ minutes since Jeff Teague has been out and Shabazz Napier. So in terms of just overall usage minutes-wise for the price tag, I think it's worth it in terms of maybe cash, but in tournaments, there's not much of an upside there. So that's where I'm at, gang. Hopefully you all enjoyed this podcast and or video version of this show and this episode for the November 11th. NBA slate. It's a 6-game slate, one of my favorite size slates right there. 8 games is probably the best. 6 games is really good as well. So thank you so much. It is 6:54 p.m. or a.m. right now. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm going to go drink some more coffee. If you can hit the subscribe button, I really do appreciate that. On the audio version, if you could hit the 5-star rate and review, say something nice about the show, what you like about it. Leave your fantasy draft handle if you have one, by the way. You can be entered into a raffle, but leaving the review helps me out the most, helps me reach more people on the audio version. Helps me grow and expand even more, doing something that I truly do love to do. So thank you all so much. Hit me up on Twitter at SalVetriDFS. Hit the subscribe there, the follow there on Twitter, and then also on Instagram. Be sure to follow me there, linked up all down below. So exclusive content's over on Patreon. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to check out Fantasy Draft. That is also linked up down below. If you click the link down below for Fantasy Draft, it does help me indirectly. It's just a tracking link. It shows where they came from. I did not get any of your money, so don't worry about that. My name's Sal. You already know that. Peace out, gang. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed that video. Above my head, if you're not already subscribed to this channel, I do ask you if you can please hit that subscribe button. It helps me out a good amount to reach more people. You can also follow me on Twitter. That's over there. Right in the corner is my @SalVetriDFS Twitter. And then above, you'll find my Patreon link. You can click on that if you want more exclusive content for me. Or a video is going to pop up, so why don't you check that one out as well. I think it's going to be beneficial for you. Thank you so much again for tuning in, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.